So, you're heading to the tropics. Well, then there's something you should probably keep in mind. Malaria is a disease caused by the Plasmodium parasite. It's common in tropical climates. If you get infected by this parasite, it can cause some very nasty symptoms, like chills, fever, aches, and even some more serious symptoms that I'll go into later. The Plasmodium parasite is carried in two species, Anopheles mosquitoes and humans. It is transmitted to humans via the bite of an infected mosquito. The parasite is carried around by an unsuspecting mosquito inside its salivary glands. When the mosquito bites a human to feed, the parasite hiding in the salivary glands enters the human's bloodstream. From here it will travel to the liver and into the liver cells. A cell is the smallest living unit. There are trillions of cells making up the human body, many different types with different functions. Once inside a liver cell, the parasite can form a cyst-like structure called a schizont, where it will be able to transform and replicate itself. Kind of like a caterpillar making a cocoon and turning into a butterfly. Now the parasite can infiltrate the human's red blood cells. These cells are oxygen transporters. The parasite can hitchhike around the whole body hiding in these cells. While in the red blood cells, it will form another schizont and feed on hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is what binds oxygen in red blood cells. This new schizont will burst, releasing many more parasites which will go on to infect more red blood cells and continue this cycle. This is called the ring cycle. It's an asexual form of reproduction. This cycle is responsible for some of the symptoms I mentioned earlier. While this cycle is going on, some of the parasites produced will actually be what's called gametocytes. This is just a different form of the parasite which can be further divided into male and female. If an uninfected mosquito comes along and bites an infected human, they will suck up these male and female parasites with the blood, to then be cycled back to the form held in the original mosquito's salivary glands, ready to infect another human. So how does malaria affect the human body, and why is it such a dangerous disease? As you know, the parasite can travel all over the body via red blood cells and to a number of organs. One organ that's very important in the course of this disease is the spleen. The spleen has several jobs in the body, one of which is destroying old or damaged red blood cells. It does this with immune cells called macrophages. You can think of immune cells as cells that act to protect your body from things that may cause it harm. Macrophages basically sense and engulf, or eat, things in the body that aren't meant to be there, destroying them in the process. These splenic macrophages will destroy the red blood cells that have been infected and damaged by the Plasmodium parasite. So the more red blood cells infected, the more that will be destroyed. Combined with the fact that the parasite is feeding on hemoglobin, if too many red blood cells are destroyed, it can cause a condition called anemia, where the blood's ability to carry oxygen to the organs is diminished. This will then cause fatigue and weakness in the individual. But this isn't the only problem you have to worry about if you get malaria. When the macrophages destroy the infected red blood cells, they release what is called cytokines. The cytokines are inflammatory, and if too many build up, they cause you to experience chills, excessive sweating, and headaches. They also impair the body's ability to make new red blood cells, further contributing to the anemia. Now all of that sounds pretty bad, but believe it or not, it gets worse. Cytokines released by macrophages tell the small blood vessels in organs like the brain, lungs, and kidneys to start producing adhesion molecules. These act kind of like a selective net, catching and binding only the things that match its receptors. While the Plasmodium parasite is in the red blood cell, it causes it to express surface proteins. These are just structures that change the way the cell interacts with other cells in the body. These surface proteins just happen to match up with the adhesion molecules I mentioned earlier. If an infected red blood cell gets caught by an adhesion molecule, it will trigger a chain of events that cause the formation of a clot on the blood vessel wall. Having this clot in the blood vessel obstructing blood flow will cause further inflammation and some of the more serious consequences of malaria that I mentioned at the start of the video. Obstructing blood vessels and prolonged inflammation in the kidneys impairs their ability to do their job, which is filter toxins out of the blood. This can lead to a condition called metabolic acidosis. This is just a fancy way of saying there is too much acid in the blood. This can then lead to hypoxia, which just means not enough oxygen, and hyperventilation. Obstruction of vessels and inflammation in the lungs can contribute to respiratory distress syndrome. This can be laboured or irregular breathing and relates back to the hyperventilation caused by damage to the kidneys. As you might imagine, this blood vessel obstruction and inflammation that can cause so many problems in all of these other organs is especially dangerous if it occurs in the brain. When blockage of small blood vessels occurs at the brain, it can lead to a condition called cerebral malaria. This basically just means brain malaria. And it can lead to swelling on the brain, damage to brain tissue, seizure, and coma. If the damage to the brain is too extensive, it will cause death. This is one of the most common ways people die from a malaria infection and has a very high death rate once it develops. In saying that, all of this can actually be prevented with the right anti-malarial medicines such as doxycycline, mefloquine, and chloroquine. Treatment is also available if malaria is contracted, so be sure to inquire with your GP before heading off on your trip.